So previously, we built a 125cc turbo drift kart out of a kid's quad bike that we found on Facebook Marketplace for $100. It had a fully custom turbo setup and even had a fully tunable ECU with fuel injection. It had turbo flutter. It popped flames. But unfortunately, we blew the turbo on the dyno before we got a chance to test it. But you didn't think we were going to give up there, did you? We're taking everything we learned from the previous build and turning it up to 11. A bigger 150cc engine, a stronger frame, and a total redesign of this thing from the ground up. That's right, the drift kart's back, baby. So there are a couple of big goals that I'm aiming to achieve with this new version of our drift kart. With the 125cc motor, we made about 1.5 to 2 pounds of boost with this turbo. Basically, what that means is this turbo was probably a little bit too big for the motor. Now that we're running this brand new 150cc motor, we should be able to spool up the turbo a little bit better. That and the old motor that we were using was a really average quality Chinese motor. This new motor that we're using is much better quality. The ports are much bigger, which I'm hoping equals more turbo spool. That'll mean more dose, and fingers crossed that means a bunch more power on the dyno. Now, because this is a drift kart, when you're drifting, you want a whole bunch of steering lock on the front wheels. I'm hoping to achieve somewhere around 90 degrees of steering lock with this front end. So I guess the first thing we should do is completely tear this whole thing down to a bare frame. We need to remove everything off our drift kart so we can start to get an idea of how we're going to modify our front end for more steering angle. I have to admit, being back working on the drift kart is an absolute breath of fresh air after working on our fake Lamborghini build for the past 6 months. I removed our fresh 150cc engine that was just dummy fitted, as well as our exhaust, the turbo and the intercooler piping, and we're ready to get to work. Alright, so we have the drift kart partly stripped down, and as you can see, the frame isn't exactly in the best condition. Some of the work on the frame is, well, definitely questionable. So what we're trying to achieve with our front end here is a lot more steering lock. So previously we had about this much. What we want is a whole lot more. So as you can see, as we dial in more lock, we have things like the intercooler and the intercooler piping in the way. And what we need to do to mitigate that is extend our front LCAs. That in turn will push these wheels out wider and allow us to have more lock, which will make this thing so much more fun to drive. So first things first, we need to chop off all the old LCA stuff. Then we can start figuring out how we can make this new lock kit work. World's smallest intercooler, aka a motorbike radiator that we made into an intercooler. This thing actually works, which is pretty crazy. Alright, time to remove the front knuckles and wheels, and you can really see here just how average the workmanship is on this frame. But that's okay, because we're about to chop it up and make it way more awesome. Okay, so now we're ready to start thinking about rebuilding our front end. So basically what we're wanting to work out is how long we need to have our LCAs so the wheel is as far away from the kart as possible so that when it turns to lock, we clear everything. Using this center line, I centered the kart on the table and drew up a template to make sure that we get our new LCAs in the perfect position on both sides. Also, I don't really know what the deal is with the porno music playing in the background, but we've committed to it now, so we're just gonna have to roll with it. So we have the intercooler piping back on now, and that is so we can see exactly where we want the knuckle to sit, and that tells us the length of the LCA. Geez, that's a lot of lock, which means that we want our knuckle to sit somewhere around here. So we grab our trusty ruler and take some final measurements, triple checking we're going to clear everything on full rotation of the wheel. Once we're happy, we grab our 25mm steel tube, mark out our measurements and throw it in the tube bender to bend it to a near 90-degree bend. Then I cut a wee slot in the frame and test fit our new piece. Oof, that fits like a glove. Time to tack weld it in place. I'm definitely happy with how it looks, but I think it needs a gusset to add some strength as we've extended it so much. So we get out our trusty cardboard and make a template of the shape that we're going for. Then we trace that onto some 1.6mm steel, cut it out and tack it in place.
Finally, we tack our bracket that holds our knuckle back in place. I used a digital angle gauge to make sure that our camber is the exact same on both sides.
So our drift cart is now officially too big for our table. Also, your boy got a fresh new cart. Look at this. Feeling good, but this thing is looking wide. And I'm relatively happy with the results from our new extended LCAs. Look at this. The design's turned out pretty good, and I think it's going to work. But let me show you the lock that we get now. So good. So now what we need to figure out is how to connect the steering column to the wheels itself. And to do that, we are going to extend our already extended tie rods. So these are fully adjustable tie rods, and we have extended them in the past, but obviously now this is not going to work because it's far too short because we've extended our LCAs. So we're going to cut these up and extend them. Then we need to figure out when we bolt them up whether these angles here are actually going to work with each other. We are also going to remove and modify our steering column because instead of having two outside holes right here, we're going to drill one in the middle, and I'll show you guys why in a second. $130mm, let's go. So our new steering setup is now together and complete, and now is the moment of truth. All right, here we go. So let's see if my basic maths actually worked out properly. Ooh. All right, so that is full lock. And I'd say that is a huge improvement over what we had at the beginning of the video. Look at that. It's not quite 90 degrees, but there's definitely a lot of lock going on there, that's for sure. Dang, I'm actually over the moon with that. I can't believe it works. So our extended tie rods, our pickup points, everything like that is actually working really well. No binding whatsoever, which is pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I did fluke most of this. I did a little bit of Googling and looked up some pictures of some other carts that people have built, but I'm really happy with how this has come together. So we can actually add a little more lock here because you can see we've still got clearance on full lock on our intercooler piping. So if we want to go more, we can, and that's simply by changing the pickup point here on the knuckle. You can just drill a different hole, adjust that, and that'll give us a different leverage point, and you can add more lock. So I definitely call that a success. Now, a couple of things I'm not super happy with. I think I've got a little too much camber going on the front wheels. Now, that's not really that hard to fix, and I'll dial that out off camera. But the other thing is we've raised the cart here, so it's a little higher at the front. It is super important to me that this thing looks awesome when it's finished. So I'm thinking maybe we're gonna get a front splitter or some kind of front lip that we're gonna run here so we can run a gangster low. We're gonna install a rear wing on this thing. All about the style. I think it would look sick with a wing. There's something I need your help with. So I'm currently debating which turbo we run on the 150cc motor that we're putting in this cart. So this is the turbo that we're currently running on the cart. I really like this turbo mostly because it looks the goods. Like, it's got a gold compressor wheel. It looks, you know, like a proper turbo. And like I said, we made about 2 PSI on the 125cc motor with this turbo. Now we're only upsizing to a 150cc motor. That's not that much bigger than the 125, so I don't know how much more spool we'll get with this turbo. At best, in my brain, we might make somewhere around 3.5 to 4 PSI of boost, and that is probably being optimistic. Now the other option is this turbo. This is a VZ21 turbo, I believe, and it's the smallest turbo in the world. This is the turbo that we ran on the 50cc turbo motor, and I know for sure this will make about 10 PSI on our 150cc motor, which would be absolutely ideal. We should get a really nice loud dose out of it. But I want you guys' opinions. What do you think? Should I run the big turbo? Should I run the small turbo with the guaranteed results? It just doesn't look quite as good, you know what I mean? Like, big boy always looks better. All right, enough of that nerdy turbo talk. So now that we've sorted the front of the cart, it's time to work on the rear. Boom! All right, so since we've modified at the front, it's significantly wider than the rear is, and we just can't have that. So previously, we've already modified and widened the rear axle, but we didn't do the best job of it, and we didn't widen it enough. So now we're gonna strip down the rear end and remove our rear axle so we can extend and widen it.
Widening the rear axle is probably one of the more difficult jobs I've had to do on the kart, as it's really difficult to get it running perfectly true. There are probably some engineers watching that can let us know in the comments which is the best technique we should use when doing this.
Look how wonky this is. Whoops. We're gons to have to fix that. That was not a comfortable ride at all. So we've got the wheels off now and we're ready to fix our wonky rear axle. So last time I pulled the axle off the kart and did it on the table. This time we're actually going to utilize the axle being bolted up to the kart, and we're going to tack our new pieces of steel onto the axle while it's still on the kart so that we can rotate it and make sure that it's all nice and straight, because clearly the first time we did it, well, it didn't work. We've got a nice big thick piece of 19mm steel rod right here, so let's cut it up and let's get to work. So we have our extension clamped onto the axle here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tack weld this on, make sure it spins perfectly true, then we should be able to weld it up and have it nice and straight.
So I actually ended up trying 4 different techniques here to try and get our extension running true on the axle. I did finally end up getting it done, but it was an absolute nightmare.
That freaking sucked. What a job. But I think we're good now.
And finally, the rear wheels go back on the axle, and I'm so happy that that job is over and done with.
And just like that, the rear axle has been widened, and we're sitting about 100mm wider each side now, which is fantastic. The front and the rear are now equal in terms of scale, and it looks pretty awesome. But the next thing we need to take care of to complete the frame are the side steps. Now, obviously, because of our new front LCAs, we've actually raised the kart in terms of height, and I am not about that noise. It's definitely too high off the ground, and I think I'd like to modify the side steps anyway. So what I'm thinking is we cut the side steps off, and I'm gonna add some extensions to them and lower them at the same time. I'm gonna have them running as low as we possibly can. Although I'm thinking we could even put some titanium plates on the bottom so that when it does touch the ground, we throw sparks, which would be pretty rad. We're also gonna do some completely new custom pedal setups so we can get rid of all this crap in the middle as well. I'm also gonna tidy all of this stuff up as well, make it look nice and pretty. But yeah, let's go ahead and get cutting. So I've gone ahead and tidied up our side steps, ready to weld back on to the kart. And the way that we're going to attack this is, so we've got our side step here. I'm gonna have it sitting wider, and of course we're gonna have it sitting lower. So we've got our plank of wood here, and this is basically the height that we're gonna run our side steps at. So I figure we just put the wood here, sit the side step on, and then we'll go ahead and measure, and we're gonna add pieces in here, basically that's going to hold our side step on. But that's basically gonna knock off 2 birds with 1 stone by lowering it, but also giving us more foot room because we're making it wider as well. And it should look pretty awesome too. So let's go ahead and weld these side pieces in. We slide the wood out of here. Ooh, that's fancy. Final piece going in, let's go. Oh. Son of a bitch. And voila, our frame is now complete. And we now have a fantastic base from which we can build our 150cc turbo drift kart from. It's actually so cool thinking about all the phases that this frame has gone through to get to where it is. If I'm honest, there's not a whole lot of the first frame left. Maybe a couple of bits here and there, but the soul of the kart is still alive. And next up, we need to final weld the frame and get it ready for paint. Speaking of paint, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what color you think we should paint this thing. I plan on going absolutely next level with this thing, so I want the fit and finish to be absolutely perfect. And of course, it has to drift, dose, and throw flames. But that is it for part 1 of the series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We've made massive progress on this thing. And of course, I'll be releasing weekly videos until this thing is complete. Thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. I think we're like 200 subscribers away from 100,000. Of course, we need to think of some kind of celebration video to celebrate the 100K. But thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace! Honestly, I'm just so excited that this thing's back and you guys aren't ready for the finished product. It's gonna be wild. Bye!